Serious answers only, please. Story 1. In the 24 years that it has been legal for women to go topless in public where I live, I have seen it happen once. I support their choice, but I also understand why they almost never make that choice. Story 2. I honestly don't understand the question. Women have the right to go topless where I am, but they don't everywhere. I don't think it will actually change much unless I am misunderstanding the movement. Story 3. As a married man, the presence of topless women would make my wife suspicious and upset with me. Other than that, I don't mind. Story 4. I believe that if it occurred in real life, everyone would be surprised by the minimal resistance from men and the significant pushback from women. Story 5. Most women I know see their breasts as having some sexual significance. However, many women do not genuinely support the idea, even if they appear to advocate for it. Story 6. I believe that breasts are considered sexual by many people. If you want to promote body positivity, that's commendable, but it's important to recognize that they can be viewed as sexual by others. Story 7. I really don't have a stake in this matter. Even where it is already legally permitted, very few people participate for obvious reasons, so it is difficult to view it as a priority for any large group. Story 8. Freeing the nipple is a wonderful idea in theory. In fact, full non-sexual nudity is also a wonderful idea in theory. In practice, however, it would take a few generations to normalize this concept to the point that people do not really care. During that time, those stuck on the idea of "have breasts, cool," would likely have trouble regulating their own behavior, making it at best unpleasant and at worst unsafe for those who are advocating for freeing the nipple. This is not about victim blaming or a lack of accountability for men. It represents a major cultural shift regarding something that is genetically hardwired, such as sex and reproduction. We have proven that social norms can eventually override genetic wiring, but achieving this is not easy. Story 9. The real answers are the ones you have specifically wanted to avoid in your title. The third best answer you will receive is, don't care. Story 10. I think it's unreasonable that anyone cares. Nobody should be offended. Shouldn't be an issue. Breasts have a sexual component. People who are attracted to women will look. If that makes someone uncomfortable, then it should be considered when making decisions about covering up. However, it does not justify harassment, and I don't understand why some people behave as if it does. I don't understand why we have to focus on trivial matters. Story 11. Do what makes you comfortable. I don't have an opinion on that. Story 12. Here is the thing. There is nothing inherently wrong with it. I understand the sentiment. However, for it to work, we would need to normalize nakedness to an excessive degree as a society, and I do not see that happening anytime soon. Story 13. It's normal to see topless sunbathing on a beach in my country, as it isn't prohibited. So, free the nipple in an appropriate location wouldn't bother me. Story 14. I have been to nudist beaches. Eventually, you get over the sexual nature of it and just do your own thing. Story 15. I believe that being topless should be normalized to the extent that naked breasts are desexualized in society. This shift could significantly impact body awareness and acceptance, challenge the bra industry, and potentially create a slightly less intimidating world to live in. Story 16. I fully support it, but I also question everyone who claims that most women do not view breasts as sexual, with nipples being an extension of that. Men's nipples show when it's cold, so I don't understand why women's nipples should be treated any differently. The issue is that there is often woman-on-woman criticism. There are no laws enforcing that women must wear bras, yet I frequently see women saying hurtful things to each other regarding this topic. Story 17. It's a nipple. It's really not that much different from my own. If you want to go topless, why not? It's your body, right? Just don't be strange about it. Even for a man, there are some situations where it might be inappropriate. Want to work out without a shirt? That's fine. Yard work without a shirt? Okay. Beach, pool, water activities? Go for it. Attending your child's parent-teacher association meeting? That might be a bit strange. Story 18. I believe that if the weather is suitable for going shirtless, everyone should feel free to do so if they wish. If someone needs to breastfeed their child, they should spend minimal time searching for a place to do it, and there is nothing wrong with breastfeeding in public spaces. For me, that's about all there is to it. Additionally, I find it absurd how many places and platforms tolerate explicit content as long as there are no female nipples in photos or videos. Story 19. In Sweden, where I live, it is completely legal to go not just topless but also completely nude in public. While it is not a right that people use very often, they do have the right to do so. Story 20. If a woman touches my nipple, nothing happens. In the worst-case scenario, she might get a conviction for assault. If I touch a woman's nipple, I could be convicted of sexual assault. So let's not pretend that female nipples aren't sexual. Story 21. If women's breasts weren't sexual, it would have been fine. However, the current situation resembles a call for freeing other parts of the body. Story 22. Do whatever you want to do. However, breasts will always be sexual in nature to me and will never fail to be noticed. Story 23. I find arguments that breasts are not sexual to be disingenuous. That said, I also find wider society rather hypocritical and overly harsh about sexuality in general, so I generally support it. Story 24. We have a clothing-optional beach in my city. Many women choose to go topless. Generally, if I am there, I have about 5 minutes of noticing the situation, and then it becomes normal. Humans are remarkable at adapting to anything. Story 25. If a larger individual can walk around the supermarket at midday on a Friday shopping for essentials while startling children with his visible physique, then a woman can expect to do the same. Personally, I would prefer everyone to wear a shirt while in the supermarket, but outside of that, it is fair game. Story 26. I cannot say I am familiar enough with it to know exactly what it advocates. I have been on beaches in countries where toplessness is normal, and it loses the thrill very quickly. Story 27. I have no objection to women being topless anywhere men are. However, I question the effectiveness of the movement itself. I have been in areas where it is legal and those where it is illegal, and the only place I have seen a woman topless in public was in a nude sauna. But by all means, go for it. Legalize it. Go topless. Who is opposed to this? Story 28. Power to women for it. Honestly, I love the concept, but I think there are always going to be bad agents that ruin it for everyone. That said, I believe if women took the power back and normalized it, society would adopt it in due time. Frankly, letting people get uptight about public breastfeeding is unreasonable and a mistake that society has allowed to continue for long enough. Additionally, I am interested in whether desexualizing it by normalizing it will take power away from industries that profit from it being considered sexual. I am just thinking out loud at the end. Story 29. I do not mind if a person chooses to go around naked. Just please place a towel on shared seating. Story 30. I don't think about it and I don't care. Nipples are just nipples. It doesn't bother me if my kids see them. They have them. Sometimes they appear in movies we watch. Who cares? Story 31. I support the opposite viewpoint. I believe we should treat men's chests as scandalous and sexual in the same manner. Story 32. It's women reinforcing the idea that women cannot go topless. I have never seen a man complain. A topless woman is going to receive significantly more unwanted attention, though. Story 33. How can one answer this without relating it to being attracted to breasts? Breasts are, in fact, both intriguing and interesting to observe. It is like asking how you would feel about going outside naked in a Wisconsin winter without mentioning feeling cold. Story 34. Equality is important, and I support it. However, breasts will always be sexualized. Ladies, do what you want. I promise to act like a mature and respectful man, but I cannot guarantee the same from others. Story 35. I don't care how women dress or what body part they choose to expose in public, but they shouldn't complain about the male gaze. If you expose yourself in public, I am attracted to it and I will look. I will try to be as discreet as possible, but I will look. Story 36. Honestly, I think they are heavily sexualized because they are kept hidden in society. If we had a society where breasts on display were just a normal thing, Most people probably wouldn't care and would treat them the same as a topless man. Though we aren't in that society, and I don't foresee us ever being there personally, I don't mind what a woman does with her breasts. She can tattoo them, pierce them, or paint them luminous colors and pretend to be a traffic light. I'll go about my day, probably with a puzzled expression at the last example. Story 37. It is hilariously misguided. Wearing a shirt is not a form of oppression because someone is controlling your actions. Breasts get a reaction. Man breasts do not. Women understood this almost immediately and generally found it to be a good practice to keep them covered in social situations. No one is oppressing you. There are just foolish behaviors and sensible ones. Story 38. Women are trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist to feel better about themselves. It is quite unfortunate. Story 39. It should not even be an issue. They should be able to be topless anywhere men can be topless if they choose to be. Story 40. Childish and immature movement that even the average woman would not support because they have more important things to worry about. Story 41. I am accustomed to seeing topless and naked women because nudism was part of the culture I grew up in. It does not bother me. Story 42. I think it depends on the person, her size, and her behavior. If you visit a museum, you will see paintings and sculptures that portray nude women in various situations. The nipples are shown, but it is not a big deal because the women are displayed in an artistic way, not for pornography. The chests are flat on purpose. Except for a few paintings that are meant to be provocative, showing breasts is not an issue because it is not intended to be arousing, and it is almost impossible to perceive it in a sexual way. I am not against the free nipple movement as long as it does not become an excuse to post inappropriate content online. There are other places on the internet for that, so stay away from younger audiences. Story 43. I'm not going to stop them, but everyone will be staring and making comments and maybe worse. Nipples are attached to breasts, and breasts are seen as sexual to most people. I would honestly be a little worried for those who did it, knowing that. I also don't feel like we are ready as a society for children to be able to stare at random breasts everywhere, especially given how sensitive the topic is in games and media now and how accessible it has become. Story 44. I think even if it were legal everywhere, ladies probably wouldn't because the uncomfortable men in the world would be staring. Story 45. Who cares? If you want to walk around bare-chested, what difference does it make to anyone else on earth except for those who are immature or perverted? None. To those individuals. Find something meaningful to contribute to the world instead. Story 46. Here is the problem I encountered. My ex became extremely jealous and upset when a friend I invited to a barbecue went without a bra. It was significant enough that this friend ended up on her forever list. It was very uncomfortable and out of my control. I can understand how some partners might feel that this is a violation, and I didn't blame my ex for it. Story 47. I don't think you can separate those from it. That's like saying let's talk about gun control without discussing people getting shot. Story 48. I support the idea. Even as a toddler, it made no sense to me why women couldn't go topless outdoors. Breasts are not sexual organs or indecent. Story 49. I don't think about it. There are many more important issues affecting the world right now. This issue is quite forgettable. Story 50. I really don't understand why people act as though it is the nipples specifically that make breasts sexual. As a straight man, I would get a lot more out of seeing a bare-breasted woman with only her nipples covered than a clothed woman with her nipples poking out of little holes cut out of her garment. Forgive the comical imagery. I am making a serious point. To answer your question, though, if men can expose their chests in public, it seems unfair if women cannot. Especially if they are using them for their intended purpose. Not allowing women to breastfeed in public is just absurd to me. Between that and having reproductive rights stripped away in some places, or never granted in the first place in others, by male-dominated governments and lobby groups, no wonder many women are frustrated. I certainly would be. Story 51. You can look at something from both an arousal standpoint or a neutral point of view. I can look at breasts and feel aroused. I can also look at breasts and not feel aroused. My opinion is simple. Whatever is most beneficial to women is what matters. You do you. I understand that bras can be uncomfortable and cause soreness. So why put yourselves through that? I know that for the occasional hour, lingerie can feel and look sexy, as it is intended to do. I would like to think that sports bras are the most comfortable type of bra to wear, though I have never really thought to ask about it. Just as women rarely inquire about what is comfortable for my anatomy boxer briefs, by the way. Story 52, what is it really about? Are they suggesting that breasts and nipples shouldn't be sexual, or that it should be acceptable for adults to openly express their sexuality? Story 53, I thought the purpose of the campaign was for public breastfeeding, which I wholeheartedly support. Is my understanding of this campaign incorrect? Story 54, I honestly don't care either way. Breasts are highly fetishized in my culture. I doubt that allowing women to go topless in public will change that. Story 55. I had an ex who would not wear a bra. I was with her for 5.5 years. Only after breaking up did I realize this wasn't exactly the norm to have visible nipples under a shirt. It's just a nipple. Story 56. In favor. I experienced seasonal depression, and few things feel as good as the warmth of the sun. Nobody should be denied that. Story 57. Do what you want with your body. More power to you. However, I believe it is incredibly dangerous. There are millions of individuals who may see exposed body parts as an invitation to harass you, and the consequences could be severe. As a new father of a daughter, the world terrifies me. Story 58. I love being shirtless and wish women could enjoy the same freedom without social pressure. If the nipple is freed, I will try my best to be relaxed about it. Story 59. I think it's great. I just wish we could achieve gender equality so I could walk around comfortably without trying to hide my bulge. Excuse me. My eyes are up here. Story 60. I don't think men care. I believe it's older women who are concerned about younger women walking around topless. Story 61. I don't care how anyone, male or female, dresses as long as they are not endangering public health. Nudity is not inherently sexual, and if someone is showing something I don't want to see, I simply look away. Even if it's something I don't mind seeing, I lose interest fairly quickly. However, in the instances I have seen women strolling around topless in public, 3 out of 4 were exhibiting strong signs of drug use or mental illness. Due to the influence of religion on society, most women receive negative attention and risk their safety even in places where it is legal, so it really doesn't happen often. Story 62. Places where nudity is not as deeply taboo seem to have a better overall respect for the bodies of oneself and others. For many women, breasts can be a source of self-consciousness, often filled with shame or unhappiness. This is tragic because accepting and loving who you are, including your body, is vital for mental well-being. Additionally, the concept of cleavage is entirely fabricated. There is nothing inherently unique about the space between nipples. However, by concealing a portion of the breast, the exposed area is limited, creating the allure of nipple adjacent. It works because it is an illusion. Story 63. To be honest, I think it makes sense for private areas to be more discreet. I don't understand why a nipple is considered a private part for one gender when a man can walk around shirtless. I support the movement to free the nipple. Story 64. As an Australian woman, I rarely bare my breasts because every boy has a mobile phone, and there would be competitions on every street corner. It is enough that we have women in the country exposing their buttocks almost everywhere. Exposing breasts would be too much. Australian women are worse than Brazilians in this matter. Story 65. Free them. If it is good enough for the men, then it is more than good enough for the women. Just understand that we love seeing them and will have a very long adjustment period. Story 66. It has been normal in many cultures in the past and still is in some today. As far as I know, they did not have any extra issues because of it. I do not see a reason to be against it. Story 67. Personally, I believe that a society with a more comfortable view of the naked body would be beneficial. We often perceive seeing someone naked as an outrageous concept. However, we are all fundamentally similar. We possess the same physical features. There is nothing new to discover about it. I understand why this topic can create tension among various groups. There is already enough scrutiny regarding women wearing overly small bikinis or white shirts. It may sound counterintuitive, but I think people would respond more positively if we were more accustomed to seeing others naked. We have made the presence of skin beneath our clothes seem like a shocking revelation, leading to exaggerated reactions when people actually see it. Story 68. I do not care. Do whatever feels comfortable for you. However, I attend an electronic dance music festival where women and men feel comfortable being topless or even naked in front of thousands of people. None of us judge or gawk there. Story 69. It's unfair to penalize women for going topless when men can do it. Regardless of what people may think, it is unjust. Women likely want to go topless far less than men do, but having a law that forbids them is an overreach. Story 70. I believe that certain individuals' inability to control themselves and some control-oriented extremists should not diminish the freedom of others. It is legal in my country and much of Europe, and most people do not care after the initial days of exposure. Story 71. It would be strange and difficult not to stare at since it is so uncommon in the majority of modern civilizations. It would be far more awkward if it involved family members. I think there are certain societies where everyone is barely dressed. At that point, it wouldn't feel as strange because both women and men are not wearing tops. However, I believe this is due to the humid environment rather than a specific movement. Story 72. In absolute seriousness, I have been living in a world where the female nipple is something that has been hidden, explicitly for the reason that it is something that men will find sexually arousing. Logically, I know that this is a completely false construct enforced by societal norms, and that the female nipple is no different than the male nipple and is inherently non-sexual. That being said, while I fully support a woman's right to go around topless since the breast or nipple is not a sexual organ, I still cannot help the fact that, due to the society and culture I was raised in, I will likely still get sexually aroused upon seeing exposed female nipples. Hopefully, after enough daily exposure, I will stop perceiving nipples in a sexual sense, but only time and experience can really tell. In summary, I fully support the movement to free the nipple. However, I personally know that I would find it challenging not to react when seeing bare female nipples, based purely on the puritanical body standards I was raised on. Story 73. Western society places significant sexual importance on nudity. I am not exempt from this, despite being raised in a community with nudists as neighbors, near a river where almost everyone swam nude. In my opinion, this emphasis contributes to many issues surrounding self-worth and body shaming. We typically only see nudity in extremes, either in adult content or as something to be ashamed of. Consequently, people compare themselves to these two ends of the spectrum. Moreover, there are issues related to equality. It is absurd that in many parts of the world, which are supposedly egalitarian and free from religious influence on lawmaking, women can be charged with a crime for wearing exactly what any man could wear. It's not necessarily that I believe many women would start going to beaches topless, but they, like men, should have the choice. I certainly do not go to beaches topless, likely for different reasons than many women, but if I chose to, I have the right to do so, as should everyone. Story 74. It's legal where I live. It's not very common outside of the beach in summer or during festivals. There are large stretches in the capital along the dockside, which is no longer operating as a port, but is used recreationally since the water is now cleared for swimming, where you'll see more topless women than not during the height of summer. Personally, I don't see why it's even a question. Making the body illegal seems very strange to me. I can understand that being completely naked in public can pose hygiene challenges in places like cafes and restaurants, but toplessness seems harmless to me. Story 75. If men can do it, it's only fair that women can too. If anything, women have more of a right because of breastfeeding. Story 76. I find it inappropriate if people go topless in random places. For example, if I see a man shirtless in a shopping mall, I consider it shameful and undesirable. As for women not wearing a bra, I don't have a strong opinion. I think it's acceptable in most places. However, women being topless is acceptable on the beach but not in the street or supermarket. Story 77. Yes, it is provocative, but if all women walked around topless, ordinary men would get accustomed to it after a week and would not care. The only threat to this is from fundamentalists, who are inclined to claim that their arousal is the fault of women. They exhibit the mentality of, how am I supposed to control myself if she is dressed like that? Story 78. I believe the way women want it to be is unrealistic. Should they have the right to go about topless like men without being sexualized? In an ideal world, yes, of course. However, that is not the reality we live in. It is unrealistic. Changing a culture that does not want to change would be a monumental task. Story 79. I think it is important to normalize the idea that women should not have to consider anything else besides, do I want my nipples out right now or not? Many people find bare breasts alluring, yet it is unjust that women have to fear being catcalled, groped, or otherwise verbally or physically attacked for enjoying the same freedom that any man can. I live in Germany, where we have one of the most liberal views on exposed female nipples in the Western world. If I went for a run shirtless, most people would likely judge me for being chubby or have other condescending thoughts, but other than young teenagers, few would dare to comment. Most would probably avert their eyes or take a quick glance. Conversely, if a woman did the same, she would certainly be stared at, catcalled, and confronted by parents and religious individuals about the derogatory assumptions they might hold. I do not expect the reaction to be completely equal at this time, but women should not feel unsafe or like bad people for enjoying the same freedom that any man can. In summary, let's embrace this change. Story 80. I personally don't care, but fortunately or unfortunately, women's real estate is more valuable than men's. Story 81. I believe it would make women even more uncomfortable because men would be constantly staring at them. It would also generate another insecurity in women as the way they're treated would be directly tied to the appearance of their breasts. Story 82. Distraction is a significant problem. Imagine a man who is attracted to women seeing another person while driving his family home from a soccer game. The next thing you know, he rear-ends a bus full of children, which causes a fire. Suddenly, those kids are running around with flames on their clothes, while their chaperone tries to help with an expired fire extinguisher and a too small fire blanket. This scenario can be devastating. Story 83. Without relating it to taste, how do you feel about food? Without relating it to illness, how do you feel about cancer? Without relating it to pranks, how do clowns feel about flowers that spray seltzer water? When you strip all personal context out of a situation, all you acquire is dry analysis. All that reveals is whether a person has a scientific mind or is generally ignorant and blinded by outdated belief systems. How do I feel about it without any personal context? I suppose good for them? I just don't understand why this is a question for men when removing the male context from the opinion. This seems like an irrelevant question. Story 84. I couldn't care less. You can do whatever you want with your body. The problem is more about freeing the protruding obese bellies, which seems to be in trend. Story 85. Just like many things, it wouldn't really be an issue if there weren't so many unpleasant individuals out there. Story 86. If a man can jog down the street or be at the beach without a shirt, why should a woman cover up? It is unfair to treat men like teenagers who cannot control themselves. Furthermore, sexual assault should carry harsher penalties. Women should not have to adjust their lives to meet men's expectations. That is unfair and unrealistic. Story 87. I do not agree with it personally. A topless woman is likely to receive a significant amount of unwanted attention. Story 88. I think it's unwise. After reviewing the comments, it is clear that the majority of women do not want to be topless. If we take this to its logical conclusion, allowing female nipples to be considered acceptable would mean that photos or videos, whether in public or with consent, of women's breasts would not be seen as an invasion of privacy. It is likely that only an extremely small percentage of women would be comfortable with that. There are already private nude beaches if that is what some desire. There is no reason to normalize nudity in public. Story 89. I don't see the point. Women have different bodies and different norms because of this. Culture isn't decided from the top down, so you can't just protest until someone in authority decides to finally free the nipple. It won't change how we Both men and women attracted to women perceive female breasts as sexual. Just as we can't, through protests, change any sexual traits prevalent in women that men would do without. Legally, it's about indecent exposure, which is in the eye of the beholder. I think public indecency laws are appropriate as they are, since it's essentially about reading the situation and not making people uncomfortable. Social cohesion is important. Story 90. You want male perspectives on breasts while forbidding any sexual implications? You want us to disregard biology and share opinions? Okay, ignoring biology and the fact that my childhood included many households subscribing to National Geographic just for the chance to see breasts, since there was little opportunity for an adolescent male to view them until alcohol became more accessible. Under those circumstances, I don't care about breasts, male or female. The conditions of the question are nonsensical. You can't overlook the biological basis for the prohibitions without deceiving yourself. An interest in breasts might initially be seen as a heterosexual male response, but it's more complex. I've known heterosexual women who become fascinated by a naked male chest, and others who identify as not bisexual but still express interest in female breasts, often pointing them out to me and others in our group. I've also encountered homosexual women who are quite enthusiastic about nice breasts. Story 91. Personally, I don't care, but I mean that in the sense that it doesn't actually involve me. Ultimately, I think people should be allowed to do what they want with themselves. If one woman says, "My body is my choice," then that's fine. If another says, "I wouldn't dare show my body to anyone," I'm fine with that too. It's not my issue, so to be blunt, I don't really care. Story 92. Some girls want to show themselves, but others do not. Personally, I do not care, but I do not know if my girlfriend will be okay with it. Story 93. The beach near me is topless optional. In 25 years, I have seen exactly one woman walking around without a top. It lasted 10 minutes before she put on a net top. I assume she just became uncomfortable. Story 94. My province's women have had that right for decades, and I only witnessed it once, the day the ban was lifted, when a swarm of very fit women passed by me on rollerblades while I was out for a walk. Story 95. I have attended many music festivals and outdoor parties where people roam around nude or topless, so I am completely desensitized to it. I don't really care unless it's someone interested in me and I'm willing to reciprocate. Story 96. The fact that it would be legal for a woman to cover her nipples with only pasties featuring the image of a male nipple highlights the absurdity of the notion that there is something particularly scandalous about it. Story 97. I strongly believe that people should be able to wear what they choose. If women want to wear clothing that expresses their freedom, it is their right to do so, and I fully support it. Story 98. It has been done before and I couldn't care less. Bras exist for a reason, and people will probably continue to use them. If they don't want to, then it's their loss and I don't care. Story 99. I don't care. It's just a body. Do what you want. My only concern is that it will be one more thing that random people decide to mention, as if my agreement is assumed. Story 100. Women want to walk around topless the same way men do, but they cannot ignore the fact that doing so would likely lead to sexual harassment or even assault. Women advocate for this right, acknowledging the hypocrisy while recognizing that they cannot fully take advantage of it at this time. There seems to be no reason why women should not be able to be topless in the same situations as men. Story 101. I am a naturist and believe that everyone should have the freedom to enjoy being naked or topless. Adults can separate nudity from sexuality. Story 102. I don't want to see shirtless men in public either. However, I do think breasts are so sexualized in most of the Western world that you have three groups. Those who want to look, parents who fear it will expose their children or preteen kids to sexualized body parts, and those who want to pretend there's nothing sexual about them and that it should be totally fine. Considering how much society fights over various issues, I doubt we will reconcile these groups anytime soon. I support the idea of allowing toplessness in adult spaces where male toplessness would be accepted too, like on a beach, as a middle ground. I think it's very similar to the idea of someone having an exposed back in their clothing. There's nothing inherently sexual about the back. Yet, Society has decided that it is one of the preferred parts of the body to sexualize, apart from genitals. In fact, there are enough individuals with foot fetishes that I would almost consider wearing flip-flops or sandals without socks indecent. It's not about my personal preferences, but rather whether a significant portion of the population views it through a sexual lens. I have no issue with wanting equal standards for both, but there's the added layer of breasts being something that some individuals will look at and stare. So, I think it's important for the equal standard to meet somewhere in the middle for everyone. Story 103. I support removing the taboo of nudity from society as it would provide a net benefit. I attribute my acceptance of a normal female body, as opposed to that of a porn star, to growing up with a mother who was comfortable being naked around me. The problem arises with those who want to promote body freedom but do not want to be ogled. This is unavoidable until breasts are no longer viewed sexually. Topless women will continue to have their bodies looked at. Story 104. Sure, I don't care what other people do with their bodies, as long as they are not violating my personal space. Story 105. I am allowed to walk around without a shirt. When it is hot outside, I am more comfortable that way. It seems to me that if I have the right to make myself comfortable in this manner, a woman should have the same right. I realize I misunderstood. I thought we were discussing real life, but apparently this is related to social media. I do not care about social media, but the general principle remains. If I have the right to do something, a woman should have the same right. Story 106. I think it's great. What's funny is that if you regularly see nudity, it stops being so interesting. I used to do a lot of glamour, boudoir, and fine art nude photography. When you see it every day as part of your job, it gets dull quickly. Story 107. I don't think anyone should be forced to wear anything. If someone wants to wear a burqa or a string bikini, that's their choice. I believe people should have the freedom to express themselves, even if that means being naked. Story 108. Being Scandinavian, I find it absolutely ridiculous that breasts are always seen as sexual regardless of the situation. A woman going for a hike topless or sunbathing shouldn't be viewed as sexual, nor should feeding her child. Story 109. To be fair, there was a time when men were not allowed to be topless in public. If the same thing occurred for women, like all changes, it would probably require some adjustment and getting used to. Story 110. Free them. Ultimately, it is up to the individual woman and her choice. I am indifferent on the matter. Story 111. At the end of the day, it will be different at first, but over time it will become the norm. It is simply a matter of women actually taking action. However, many women view their bodies in a sexual context, which may prevent them from acting, leading to only discussion and complaints about the issue. Story 112. Many places do not have laws against going topless. Most public nudity laws focus on genitals. There was a video featuring a person discussing an annual march to free the nipple. It is stated in the law that this is permitted, but people continue to do it regardless. Story 113. I don't care about seeing anyone's nipples in public, regardless of gender. Please cover them up. Thank you. Story 114. Within the last 4 days, you have posted 6 times sexualizing Charli D'Amelio for doing normal activities, such as wearing a bikini on the Charli D'Amelio subreddit. What is the purpose of this post? Story 115. Censorship equates to control and projection. If I feel this way, everyone else must be too. And if individuals lack open-mindedness, they assume nobody else is capable of it. This mindset has multiple implications for the natural state of the female form, but some are so inhibited that they cannot see it as anything other than sexual. We are experiencing a pushback against the progressive advancement of society, as is always the case, and unfortunately, we may have to wait for the close-minded to either catch up or fade away. How long did it take for breastfeeding to be accepted? Honestly, I'm not sure if it ever was accepted by those resistant to all forms of progress. Story 116. I'm all for it. However, I firmly believe in people having the freedom to do what they want and manage their own consequences. We do not need excessive rules to protect suburban parents and their children. Story 117. As long as it is not inappropriate, I fully support women being topless. However, do not be offended when I take a good look. Female anatomy will attract attention, and you may be observed by men you do not want looking. This is simply a consequence of your choice. Story 118. I'm not a person who is particularly attracted to breasts, so I'm not sure if that makes me more or less biased regarding this question. I believe it's one of those things that would need to be accepted and practiced everywhere for a long time before it stopped being considered unusual, but the next generation would be better off for it. I'm sure there's some innate biological urge related to it, but the intense sexualization of breasts must be a learned behavior, as we treat them similarly to genitals. It makes me cringe to see a young girl without a shirt, and that reaction is certainly not innate to my biology. In summary, if we stop acting like breasts are a big deal, they would stop being a big deal. However, I wouldn't expect to see significant cultural change, such as breasts being regarded as mundane as other parts of the body, in my lifetime. Story 119. Intellectually, it is a fair argument. Why are men's nipples not sexualized while women's are? Practically, I think it would take at least a generation for men to stop staring at bare breasts in public because we have all been raised to think breasts and nipples, especially, are sexual and should be hidden away. Story 120. Well, I am a man, and it has always been perfectly legal for me to go shirtless in public. Other than the beach, I have never had a desire to walk around in public without a shirt, and I assume most women feel the same. Perhaps if I were not a hairy individual with a dad bod, but rather a fit person with toned arms and a six-pack, I would want to show it off. The same likely applies to women. The average woman may have some stomach fat and non-symmetrical breasts, so they are not exactly thrilled about showcasing their bodies in public. Story 121. I am supportive of people expressing themselves as long as it does not harm others, so I do not mind if women are topless in public. This perspective comes from someone who is not aroused by or interested in breasts. Story 122. I have spent time on clothing-optional beaches around the world. To be honest, after you see them often enough, breasts are not that special. Story 123. Personally, I don't want to see a man without a shirt in public. However, as far as I'm concerned, it should be perfectly fine for people to be completely nude in public if that is what they want to do. It's just a body, and I have seen many bodies in my lifetime. They are no big deal. Story 124. I am not in favor of it. Most people say, if men can, women should be able to. But I don't want to see men's chests either. When I am at the gym and a man has his shirt off, I always roll my eyes. Story 125. I don't understand the current practice of obscuring women's nipples. Men have nipples too, and it would be strange if men covered theirs with stickers while swimming or sunbathing. Speaking from my personal experience in the 1970s, when I visited a beach in the Netherlands, I noticed more women walking and sunbathing without a top than with one. It was quite surprising to see older women with sagging breasts. Story 126. I cannot be bothered, and I do not understand who these people are that have the time or energy to care. Story 127. What is free the nipple? If I may ask, I'm getting weird thoughts. Please help. Story 128. I was involved with a nude resort for a long time. People are nicer without clothes. I would be okay with clothes being optional everywhere at all times. As for the term free the nipple, it's not my place to comment on what others want to do with their bodies, so I'm fine with it. I have a harder time with unattractive toenails, but I can even deal with that. Story 129. If men are allowed to do it, women should be able to as well. It's as simple as that. A nipple is just a nipple. What's the big deal? Story 130. I think many men need to put their shirts back on unless they are at the beach. I don't mind if women go topless at the beach. Story 131. I think it's less about women actually wanting to go around in public without a top. Mostly, they don't like being told they can't. I don't care. Go without a top. Be aware that you're likely to be the center of attention, and some people will stare. Just as they can stare at you for wearing or doing anything out of the ordinary in public. Nobody is obligated to avoid staring at your bare body in public. Is it rude and awkward to stare? Yes, but some people will do it. Story 132. If I disregard all aspects of being aroused, you may do what you wish. If it is not hurting anyone, there is truly no reason not to engage in something. Story 133. In all seriousness, I think it is rather silly that men can be topless and show their nipples while women cannot. Story 134. I support the freedom of expression and oppose government restrictions, so I support the Free the Nipple movement. Story 135. I support consistent standards for all individuals. If seeing nudity is the price to pay for that, then so be it. Story 136. Women should have the right to go topless without fearing the stigma attached to doing so. However, I understand why most women choose not to go topless. Nobody wants men staring at them. That can be uncomfortable. Story 137. I think you'll find more critics among women. This wouldn't lead to excessive objectification. Most clothing-optional beaches demonstrate that. Even among men, how many shirtless men do you actually see away from places like beaches? Story 138. I'm not sure why every beach in America couldn't be topless. I'm older and have seen my fair share of bodies, and I still appreciate them. It seems unreasonable at this point for a naked body in public, especially at a pool or a beach, to be terrifying. Story 139. It's similar to empowering sex work for me. It seems misguided and strange, but it doesn't offend me. However, it will likely backfire and give more support to the argument that all men are problematic. Story 140. I support the idea, but I doubt we will ever see it. Men are motivated by largely misguided reasons, while women oppose it for predominantly self-centered reasons. I do not waste time wishing for it. Story 141. It shouldn't be a big deal. If men can go shirtless, then women should also be able to. I don't believe every woman will suddenly take their tops off constantly. Just as some men choose not to remove their shirts, some women won't either. Normalizing this will help resolve the issue. The immature will adapt over time, and inappropriate behavior will be discouraged. Story 142. I don't know about Free the Nipple, but I live on a clothing-optional hippie commune. The more you see nipples, the less of a big deal it is. Story 143. I have never understood the censorship. You can show as much nudity as you want, but it is only a problem when the nipple is exposed. Story 144. Outside of seeing breasts, I don't care. I wouldn't encourage you to free the nipple in a courtroom, but if you want to attend Pilates and achieve your fitness goals, what do I care? Story 145. Without making it too lengthy, a tit for tat wouldn't solve the problem. Breasts have been sexualized since the dawn of civilization. Exposing them wouldn't prevent her from being a victim. Story 146. I, as a man, do not like being shirtless in public, even at the beach. I wish it were preferred for everyone to wear a shirt in public. Keeping all nipples covered would make me happy. Story 147. I mean, we are going to look. That is just going to happen. However, just do your thing. I am perfectly okay with it. And here is the kicker. If it is normalized, we will ultimately get used to it and not think anything of it. Story 148. I am a man who has never been comfortable taking off my shirt. Honestly, I would be fine if it were banned for men as well as women. I would feel much less awkward about keeping mine on at the beach. Story 149. From a basic legal and philosophical point of view, it is very important. We should have laws that actually have a point and purpose. The basic social contract is that we give up freedom in exchange for security. There is no justification for why women cannot walk around topless. It doesn't harm anyone or women. The law exists because women's bodies and nudity are viewed as commodities. To sell that commodity, you need to make it rare. For these reasons, I think this movement is rather important. However, I believe they are misframing it. Story 150. This may sound callous, but it's either, I don't care, or, don't want to wear a bra? That's fine, we get to see your breast prints. And yes, I'm going to look. There is literally nothing else for us to care about regarding women's desire to not wear a bra or any other type of clothing. We don't care about why you are doing it because you aren't doing it for us. Unfortunately, you can't make someone care about a cause the same way you care about it. We're heterosexual men. We enjoy seeing breasts, and that isn't going to change. We will not turn down looking if offered or available, unless it's a family member or another non-adult woman, obviously. If you're uncomfortable with men looking at you, cover up. It is the only solution. You can't control people's eyes. This includes women because they also look at other women. I'm assuming that free the nipple meant going braless, not completely topless. I think my answer still stands, but going completely topless would just be inappropriate. Men and women may have some of the same body parts, but they aren't used or perceived in the same way. It's just a double standard. But if you want to go topless, do it. You are the one who has to receive the comments about it, not us. Personally, I would not show any part of my body that I did not want people to make negative or lewd comments toward, regardless of how much I want to bare my skin. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.